let's talk about comforting movies. Obviously, this is a super stressful time for many people, and sometimes it's nice to just sit down with a movie that you know is going to make you feel good. So here is a huge list of movies that make me feel good during this terrible time. I think movies that make you nostalgic are always a great thing to make your heart feel happy. Now, obviously, that differs from person to person, but I'm just going to mention a few that are very nostalgic for me. The first one is It Takes Two. I loved this movie when I was little, and I've watched it since then, and it still holds up. This stars Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, as well as Steve Guttenberg and Kirstie Alley, and essentially Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen discover that they're identical. They're not twins in this movie, I don't think, but essentially one of them is like this super rich daughter to her dad, and then the other one, it goes to like this foster home, and somehow they get brought together and they decide that they want to bring their caseworker, the one girl's caseworker, as well as the other girl's dad, together to make them a couple and all that, and it's adorable, it's funny. There's also this evil stepmom character who's kind of iconic. I was never the biggest Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen fans. Like, I did read some of their books and like watch some of their shit when I was littler, but I wasn't like die hard for them. But this movie is a great one. A nostalgic movie from my childhood is Jumanji. I feel like everyone liked this movie back in the day, and I mean, even the remakes aren't so bad. This is about a board game that essentially kind of comes to life and destroys their household. I've heard some people say this gave them nightmares, which is crazy to me because I really don't find this scary, but it's just a good time. Obviously, everyone loves Robin Williams. It's crazy, it's fun, and I feel like no matter who you are, you'll enjoy it. The next one on my list is Three Men and a Baby. It stars Ted Danson, Steve Guttenberg again for some reason, and who the fuck's the third one? Oh, and Tom Selleck. This movie is essentially about three guys who are best friends and find this baby and decide to raise it. This is another movie I have watched recently, and it definitely holds up. I love this movie so much. The premise is ridiculous. There's also like this weird mafia side story that is just so silly. But overall, these three actors are just so charming that you can't help but enjoy this ridiculous premise. I have not seen the sequel, Three Men and a Little Lady, but I do want to watch it. Another one I'd recommend is We're Back, which I was never a big animated movie person, even as a kid. I don't really like them now. I didn't like them then, but this was one of the few that I really did love. Now, it's only like half animation because it's also half in the real world, but still, it's just like this weird, fun little story. It's essentially about a bunch of dinosaurs that come to New York, and that's essentially it. It's fun, it's silly, it's easy, and I feel like it's one of the less widely loved cartoon classics, so it might be one that you haven't overseen at this point, which is a good one to pick up, since we need some movies to get through this. And then my final nostalgic movie is The Pagemaster. This is the perfect one for all the book lovers out there. This is essentially about a magic library and these books come to life, and once again, I have recently watched this and it's still so good. I love that there's just specific books that belong to a specific genre and they find like little ways to include their personalities for that genre. It's super cute and magical and fun, and it does have kind of a darker feel, but like it's still, you know, it's not scary, it's still a kid's movie. And it's got Macaulay Culkin in it, who was, I mean, practically a classic of every children's movie back then. Now, another thing that I found that a lot of movies had in common when picking out my favorite comfort movies is I seem to really enjoy movies about music. And I think that makes sense. I think that's something that everybody loves. And so I find that they're all usually a little more uplifting and very easy to get through and just like bring your heart full of joy. So here are 8 movies that I love that also are about music in some way. The first one is School of Rock. This was a classic. I feel like most people have seen this. This is basically just about a teacher who comes and teaches all the kids how to play instruments, and they kind of like join this band together. It includes Jack Black in probably one of his most iconic performances. It's just really fun, and I feel like it brings out everybody's inner child. It's a good time. Another one that I personally loved when I was a kid was Raise Your Voice. This features Hilary Duff. It has songs that like always get stuck in my head. about this girl from a small town who decides to sign up for this big time music school, and she gets in, but her dad doesn't want her to go, so she pretends she's going to stay with her aunt and goes there anyway. There's a lot about grief in this because her brother dies at the beginning of the movie. So maybe not the most uplifting, but overall, I mean, it still has Hilary Duff in it, so it's still pretty Disney-fied. There's a love story in this that I personally didn't care about, but I really enjoy the music in this especially. Next one is Josie and the Pussycats. This has one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. I still listen to it, still love it. It's very satire, very over the top. Essentially just about a band called Josie and the Pussycats and kind of their rise to fame. You definitely can't take this too seriously, but I feel like the dramatics of the movie is sure to put a smile on your face, but if not, the very fun poppy music definitely will. This movie is more about dance, and that's Take the Lead. This movie stars Antonio Banderas as a ballroom instructor who gets hired by an inner city school to supervise detention, and he teaches them all how to dance, and they enter a dancing competition. And it's just fun. I haven't seen this in quite a long time, but I loved it back when I was in high school. It has an actress from Degrassi as one of the kids. That's why I watched it in the first place. But I love anything involving dance. I used to love So You Think You Can Dance. I should get back into watching that because like I just adored it. And I feel like I was watching this around the same time I was watching that. It's hard to be sad when you're watching great people dance. Another movie like Josie and the Pussycats that is just over the top and ridiculous and fun is Rock of Ages. This includes a whole crazy list of actors, and they're all doing their best campy, ridiculous performances. I mean, you're gonna see Tom Cruise sing Pour Some Sugar on Me in this movie. It is ridiculous, but it is so much fun. These are all songs that you're gonna know. And I feel like this didn't get the best reviews at the time, but you just have to not take it too seriously because it's not meant to be taken seriously. Another movie that I feel like everyone's seen, but still so great, is Coyote Ugly. Another movie that has a fantastic soundtrack. Essentially, this is just about a bar that makes their dancers dance really sexy, and that's pretty much it. Like, there's not a lot going on. There is the small town girl trying to make it in the big city as a singer vibe as well. I feel like at one point or another, we all wanted to be a Coyote Ugly dancer. It's still fun to watch. It's still fun to sing along to, so I still enjoy it. A movie that I feel like less people talk about is Band Slam. This stars Vanessa Hudgens, who maybe this isn't the best person to be recommending a movie about, but still, I very much loved this movie when it was out, and I've seen it many times. This, again, is about some sort of music competition that they are all working to compete in. There's also a lot about grief that really hits hard, but mostly what I remember this movie for is the final musical performance that they have on stage, and I just love it. There's also another song, actually. There's a couple songs in this that are just really good. I feel like this one was underrated and not a lot of people saw it, so if you've seen everything else on this list, this one might be a good one to pick. And the last musical movie on this list is Sing Street. I saw this last year, and I just have been listening to the soundtrack ever since. This is basically about a group of boys who get together and form a band because the lead singer wants to impress this girl and he wants to cast her in his music video. But it really just becomes about this boy's friendships and sticking it to the man in like the most juvenile way. The songs are so much fun, and it's just an overall really like giddy movie. I feel like they really nail down like that age of like trying to figure out what you love and who you are, and I feel like everyone should watch this. I've still got a huge pile of movies, but these ones don't belong in any specific category, so let's go through them. The first one is The Final Girls. Now this is actually a horror, but it's more of a horror comedy, and I feel like even the most scary cat person could watch this and not be scared because it's really not that dark. It's essentially about this girl who loses her mom, and her mom was a famous scream queen back in the day. So she gets invited to this horror con sort of thing, and somehow they get transported into her mother's movie. This just plays around with a lot of horror tropes and does it in a very delightful, funny way. I enjoyed the shit out of this. I've seen this movie so many times. I could rewatch it forever. It's one of my favorite recent finds, and I love like just the horror comedy genre in general. I feel like if you're a big horror fan, you will enjoy this. If you aren't a horror fan, maybe not so much, but I definitely think it's pretty lighthearted and perfect for this time. Another comforting movie is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. I'm not a huge Spider-Man fan. Actually, I'd say he's probably my least favorite of the superheroes, but this movie was just such a delight. So kid-like, but enjoyable for adults at the same time. It brings together a bunch of different Spider-Mans from a bunch of different dimensions, and I really hope they do more with this storyline because I just think it's really fun. Movie is Happy Thank You More Please. I don't even know, this is just like one of those movies that interconnects a bunch of people's stories and their love lives mostly, but it's just delightful and happy the entire time, really. There's just nothing too deep about it going on. It's just mostly about these people's day-to-day lives and being in love and being in New York and being 20-something and trying to figure life out. If you need something easy to throw on and that you maybe haven't seen before, I'd say this is a good one to pick up. I've seen it a couple times and always enjoyed it. It's one of the few things I like Josh Radnor in because holy crap does he annoy me in How I Met Your Mother, but he's really good in this. Another movie I enjoy despite the fact that like it's somewhat sexist in that 2000s sort of way is Fired Up. This is about two best friends who decide to go to cheerleading camp because essentially there's a lot of hot girls there. I loved the two guys' friendship and like their back and forth and their banter and just like every line that came out of their mouth I really enjoyed. I feel like they had great chemistry as friends and that's what's so enjoyable about this movie. So even though it's kind of lewd, I still really like it every time I put it on. The next movie is my favorite movie of all time, and that is Little Miss Sunshine. This is a story about a girl who decides that she wants to compete in a beauty pageant despite the fact that maybe she isn't beauty pageant material. And it's about the road trip her and her family go on to get there. And this movie is delightful and quirky and, I don't know, uplifting while also having like some dark moments. Family movies aren't necessarily my favorite thing, but this one is great. I just feel like it's got that like good family dynamic while also being more unique than most of the family-centered movies out there. Another sort of maybe lewd 90s movie, though not as much as the last one, was The Girl Next Door. This was my favorite movie when I was in high school for a hot minute. This is a movie about this teenage guy and the porn star that moves in next door and how he falls in love with her, and I just loved everything about this movie when I was in high school, and honestly it's held up pretty well considering. I do feel like it's actually pretty sex positive. I loved Amal Hirsch back in the day. Alicia Cuthbert is great in this. Timothy Olyphant is fantastic in this. He's just like this dirty sleazy dude and it's so fun. I feel like this is one of the few movies from that era that actually doesn't make me disgusted with everyone from that era. It somehow manages to include sex a lot without being super sexist. So I think this is a good one if you're looking for something maybe a little more grown up than the child movies that are comforting. I don't know. Now this is a movie that I can say is not that good, but just makes me happy every time I watch it, and that's One for the Money. This is actually a book by Jan Ivanovic, and I love that series of books. It's getting a little old now, but I love them, and when they adapted it into a movie, I didn't expect much. I saw this in theaters, didn't really like it, but I watched it again at home and ended up kind of falling in love with it. This movie is about Stephanie Plum, who decides to become a bounty hunter, and it's just kind of about her trying to track down her ex-boyfriend, who is a cop who's on the run and accused of killing someone, I think. I really wish they had continued on with more movies, but this one was just so fun. It was silly, it was just popcorn worthy. Like, it is not a deep movie, it is not anything that is gonna win any Oscars, but it's just a good, silly time. Another movie from like that 2000s era of lewd frat boy humor that wasn't too bad is Accepted. This is about a kid who decides to make a fake college and accidentally ends up accepting a bunch of students, so they decided to fully go through with this fake college experience for all of these kids who couldn't get into any other college. And it's just kind of a celebration of the outcasts. Kind of reminds me a little bit of the show Community, but without all the meta commentary. Once again, just like one of the better movies from that frat boy humor generation. Another movie about celebrating the outcast is Saved. This is a movie about a Christian high school and about a girl who gets pregnant there and all of a sudden just like gets dejected by her friends and realizes that maybe being popular isn't the most important thing, and she becomes friends with all the outcasts and they all stick up for her, and it was just like one of my favorite movies back in high school, and it's definitely a movie that not as many people talk about, but I think it's a really good movie from that time period. It's got Minnie Moore as one of the stars, and she plays a very subversive role to like her good girl image, which is pretty fun. I do feel like this is a very niche movie that maybe not everyone will enjoy, but I very much did. And the last movie I want to talk about, and one of my all-time favorites, is Sugar and Spice. This is a movie about the head cheerleader getting pregnant and her and her friends deciding to rob a bank so that she can afford to have this baby. This is the movie that made me love heist movies. It is just so silly and fun and satirical, and it has a surreal sort of humor, and I feel like that is a common thread throughout a lot of the movies I love. But this is definitely one of the first ones I saw when I was younger that had that. So those are the movies that I'm going to talk about in this video. There was a lot of them. I hope you will pick up one of these movies and hopefully it will take some of the stress off your mind. And I hope you'll also come back again soon. Bye.